and Love Addict. This is an interactive show, so I welcome your questions at every point. So a love addict is someone who wasn't loved as a child or as a baby and developed the fantasy that a rescuer would come along. And in a lot of the literature, this is associated with women. Supposedly women are more likely to be love addicts. I'm not an expert on addiction. I remember from age 1 to 4, my mother was dying of cancer, and so I didn't really have parents for those 3 years, so I had a lot of different caretakers. And I remember some of them as good and some of them as bad, but they were all fleeting. I'd stay somewhere for a few weeks, and another place for a couple of months, and another place for a week, another place for a month. And so they all left. And so I guess you could say I developed fear of abandonment. I was an angry, unhappy kid. Around the age of 7, I think, when I started reading, I would develop the habit of telling myself stories, like great adventure stories, where my life suddenly became imbued with meaning and became exciting and filled with love. And I could just like sit in a chair and start telling me a story where I was the hero. And I'd feel euphoric within a few minutes. And that euphoria could carry me for hours. So even though my reality was unhappy, I had this trick to take myself very quickly into euphoria. And I developed this yearning for a rescue. And I had enough instances of rescue to know that it was possible to feel whole. It was possible to feel good. It was possible to feel loved and connected and normal. Like I might have a teacher giving me a little extra attention, perhaps lending me some books. I might like play with other kids normally for a while and feel like I was connected to them. I'd read a good book and like get taken away on a fantasy and a story, and my wretchedness would kind of leave as I like took myself to Treasure Island, or Coral Island was another book I read, or these William stories about this mischievous boy in England in like the 1930s. I loved those, so I learned that like reading could take me away and fantasy could take me away. And I started writing at about age 8, and I kind of learned that that could take me away. I started writing a diary, but then someone kept reading it, so I quit that at about age 14, because I get interrogated about why I seem so unhappy in my diary.
Who was the someone that kept reading?
It's okay, it's interactive.
Sorry.
I said it's interactive.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
My mistake.
Yeah, it's interactive. Someone close to me, I don't want to name them, but someone in my life. So I stopped writing diary about age 14, but I would try to write novels. I remember when I was 12, I started jogging, and I finished 5 marathons when I was 12. So a marathon is 26 miles, 385 yards. And back when I read, that would kind of take me away from my misery. I was a pretty lonely kid, disconnected from others. And so I remember writing this novel about me, essentially, as a protagonist winning the Olympic marathon and coming into the finish line, like in world record time, and the finish line's on a track, and the stadium's filled with people, and the girl I love is there. And after I crossed the finish line, I dropped dead of a heart attack. And she sees how much I love her. I think that's it. I've won the Olympic marathon. She sees how great I am and how much I love her. Like that was kind of the underlying themes of my stories. I remember my 5th grade teacher wrote in my school report, Luke is always very willing to share his opinions with the class, but he needs to learn to be more considerate of the slower thinker. So I would use my brain and my verbal ability to make fun of people. And that didn't tend to endear me. I was about 9 or 10. I was with my one friend, Wayne, and he had like 6 older brother and sisters. He was the youngest, I was the youngest. I had an older brother and sister, but they'd already left home, so I'd essentially been like an only child most of my life. And his older brother was living in a caravan outside the house, and Wayne knew that his older brother had porn magazines, so he went in there one day, like got his porn magazines, and we went out into the bush, and like we looked at them, and they're just like amazing. It was like, I just flushed, so bright, so red, like my pulse raced. I was a preacher's kid. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist minister's son, a Bible scholar's son, a Christian evangelist's son. Growing up in a Seventh-day Adventist community of Avondale College in New South Wales, Australia, 2 hours north of Sydney. And I was looking at porn, and like these naked women just like spreading themselves out in the gorgeous lighting, and apparently feeling no shame. It was just amazing. It was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen, and it had more of an effect on making my endorphins pop, or making my heart race, or making me feel just really excited about life. And then he went and returned the magazines to Brian's trailer, and his mother came out, and she said, "You're not looking at Brian's magazines, are you?" And we were busted. And I had so much fright, so much shame, because I had a lot of corporal punishment. Like, when I misbehaved, I got swatted. Like, I'd either get swatted out of impulsive anger, just like whack, and I'd get flying across the room. Or I got, the very methodical swatting where I'd get told what I did wrong, why this is for my benefit, why this hurts the inflictor of the pain more than it hurts me, but that I was not be able to sit down for a week and drop my pants and whack, whack, whack. And if you cry, I'm going to hit you twice as much. Whack, 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 whack. So I was afraid of getting a good thrashing. It was, it would have been the worst thing I could possibly do. Like, I grew up in a conservative Christian environment where sexual sins were the worst sins, so I just committed the worst sin. I was like 9 or 10, and I was really going to get it. Thank the good Lord, my friend's mother talked to us and said, I'm not going to tell your parents, and you got to not do that again, that can ruin your life. And she didn't tell my parents. I was so kind of afraid of the whole thing, and so afraid of my visceral reaction to looking at pictures of naked women that I deliberately did not look at Playboy or any other kind of nudie magazine until I was 16. So I stopped, sheer force of will, because I really wanted to look, but I didn't look. So from age 10 to age 16, kept it pure. Didn't go there, because I knew how much I loved it. I kind of had a sense early on that I was an addict. The addict, whether it's an addict to alcohol or drugs or porn, has certain fundamental beliefs. The addict feels that he's irretrievably bad. That's what I felt from my earliest memories, that I was irretrievably bad. Like one of my few memories of my mother, she died of cancer before I turned 4, was I'd broken into my sister's perfume collection in the bathroom, and I smeared it all over myself in the bathroom and mixed it with toothpaste. Just like made this big mess. And like my sister caught me and she started really wailing on me. And my mother, was like crawling out of her sick bed to kind of throw herself over me to ward off the blows, and says he's just a little boy, he doesn't know what he's doing. So I had this sense that I was irretrievably rotten. And I guess the way I heard the religious messages was that I was irretrievably rotten and that we all were, but I'm sure lots of other people who grew up in the same sort of environment that I did didn't go out thinking that they were irretrievably rotten, not the same way I did, but maybe I misinterpreted things. Then the other essential characteristic of the addict is that you don't believe that through normal human interaction you can meet your needs. Like just normal life is not going to be enough to meet your needs. And then the third characteristic of the addict, as I understand it, is that there is something out there that will meet your needs, that's reliable, that you can turn to meet your needs. So my addictions help me get through difficult times, because by throwing myself into fantasy, I could get a euphoric state. By looking at porn, I could get a euphoric state. By falling in love, I could have a euphoric state. By just fantasizing about love, I could feel euphoria. Thinking about rescue, imagining that someone or something could rescue me, that would give me a euphoric state. And so, for me, it was processes that I became addicted to, and they helped me get through difficult times. Because when I was an unhappy, sad, lonely kid and no one wanted to play with me, I could have the fantasy that I was this cool, great kid who was like doing something great for the Lord, doing something great for this world. And I read a lot of books about Abraham Lincoln and George Washington and Winston Churchill, and I imagined this world-transforming career for myself. So, for me, grandiosity is being one of my favorite protections from shame and feeling wretched. So I can imagine myself as really grand. Or to find those things that I could be grand at, or imagine that I'm grand at, and throw myself into those activities. When I was running marathons at age 12, now other 12-year-olds are running marathons. I was the only 12-year-old in marathons with 10,000 people. And I thought I was really grand. So I had this idea that I had an addictive personality. I was an extremist, running marathons at age 12. I'd read a lot of books. When I'd find an author that I liked, I'd read all their books. But I really didn't understand what that meant, an addictive personality. I didn't start regular psychotherapy until 1998, after I'd lost all my friends, when I decided to write an unauthorized biography of my hero, talk show host, the author Dennis Prager. So I'm a love addict. I dream of rescue. The love addict fantasizes that there are powerful, capable people out there who can rescue him. Dennis Prager, lucky enough to be in a long line of people that I imagined could rescue me. Started listening to him on the radio in 1988. And as a typical love addict, I became obsessed. and that there's rescue out there. If I can just get close to Dennis, I can be rescued. And so I went to the synagogue that Dennis went to, and developed many friends that I had in common with Dennis. And I got the idea that I wanted to write this biography of Dennis Prager. And my friend said, Luke, if you do that, we'll never talk to you again. I said, well, growing up with that Protestant idea of martyrdom, A Man for All Seasons, the 1966 Oscar winner, and the guy was a martyr, the protagonist for his beliefs. Like Protestants, were always martyring themselves for their beliefs. And I'm going to martyr myself for my belief. I'm going to write the biography of Dennis Prager. I lost all my friends.
Can I ask who Dennis Prager is?
He's a radio talk show host, and he's an author of books on Judaism.
And why did your friends not want to be friends with you if you wrote that book?
Because Dennis didn't want this. And so this was a threat to Dennis's well-being.
Is this in
And
Australia?
they took their cues from Dennis.
Is this in Australia?
And this is in Los Angeles.
Oh, no.
I moved to California in 1977, and I moved permanently to Los Angeles in 1994. So I lost all my friends at the end of 1997. When I made some money in early 1998 by writing on the porn industry, I invested it into psychotherapy with someone I went to synagogue with. I called her up and said, hey, I know you socially, but are you okay with me going to therapy with you? She said, I'm okay with it. Are you okay with it? I said, I'm okay with it. So I went into weekly psychotherapy, back-to-back sessions, an hour and a half on Fridays. And talked a lot about losing all my friends, and my life was kind of lurching from crisis to crisis as I was writing a daily blog on the porn industry and getting a lot of death threats and getting beaten up.
Why are you getting death threats?
I would write things that made a lot of people very angry.
Can you share anything?
I broke the news about a whole string of HIV infections in the porn industry and identified who was doing it. So to some people that made me a hero, to other people that made me a threat. They thought that my reporting would shut down the porn industry. I sided with those who saw me as heroic. About early on in therapy, I think my therapist said to me, what do you do when you run out in the middle of our sessions? Because usually about 40 minutes into our sessions, so I got to go to the bathroom, and I run out. I say, well, I drink a lot of water, so I just have to get urinated. She said, I was just wondering if you went to masturbate. I said, God, no, because I'm telling you I'm a sex addict, but I've never left real life to go masturbate. And she asked me, do you think you might be a sex addict? Because I was writing on the porn industry. And I said, no, because I never do anything out of control. I never interrupt real life to masturbate. I never sacrifice my values to have sex. I mean, I've had sex with over 40 women in my life, and every single one of those women has read books recreationally. I only hang out with, talk to people who enjoy reading books. Snob, whatever it is. That's who I am. And so I was never willing to sacrifice myself to have sex. I was never willing to talk to someone who I found boring, and I find people who don't read books boring, generally speaking. I was never willing to sacrifice that. I was never willing to sacrifice money, my dignity, my ethics. I've never broken the law in my pursuit of sex, never had sex with anyone underage, never had sex with a married woman. I've always thought done it in completely consensual, ethical circumstances. So I said, no, I don't think I'm a sex addict. And I was in therapy with this woman for years. And when I finally started 12-stepping for sex addiction in 2011, I told her, I said, I don't think you're a sex addict. I grew up a Seventh-day Adventist. Seventh-day Adventists believe in no nicotine, no caffeine, no smoking, no drinking. Very strong preventative health message. And get a lot of literature stories about how alcohol and drugs, like demons that can take over your life and destroy you. So I've never tried any type of illegal drug. And I've always had contempt for people who have used alcohol or drugs. It's just part of it, I think, is just my upbringing, because that was really bad, the way I was raised. Even though I've left Seventh-day Adventism, that's still kind of imbued in me. And then, I've been places where people were coming out of their 12-step meetings. I never looked at these people and said, oh yeah, that's what I want to be like. That's where I want to be. I mean, this group, like, wow, look at the love and the strength, and look what they got. I mean, they look worn down by life. They look depraved, ragged. People never dressed well, it seemed, from 12-step meetings. They were coming out drinking coffee and chain smoking. It never appealed to me. I think it was 1998 that sex addiction started hitting the news. There was a big article in the Los Angeles Times in April of 1998, and Dennis Prager devoted 2 hours to his radio show. So even though I lost my friendship with Dennis Prager, I still revered him as much as ever. And I remember Dennis saying about this article, it doesn't say anything about values and doesn't talk about anything about morality. Like, is sex addiction really an addiction? As in, if you paid someone $1 million to not have sex for a week or a month or a year, or to not look at porn for a month, would they be able to do it? I thought, yeah, that makes sense. I don't really buy this stuff about addiction. 12 steps just seem like self-obsession. You keep coming to a group and you just talk about yourself. It's just like, what's great about that? And then my biggest objection is it seemed like a moral cop-out. Like, I'm a convert to Orthodox Judaism. Like, I'm really into ethical monotheism, God-based ethics, righteousness, standards of behavior that are objective, that come from God. And I just had this sense that people come out of 12-step programs and they say, I'm an addict. I'm sorry for the way I treated you. Sorry if I ever did anything that hurt you. I realize now that I have a disease. Like, it just seemed like a cop-out. Like, I had contempt for that. I've always been active in organized religions. Started out Seventh-day Adventist, converted to Orthodox Judaism. And spirituality, again, seems to me like a cop-out. Because spirituality, the way most people use it, means I want the benefits of belonging to an organized religion without paying the price. When you belong to an organized religion, there's a huge price to pay. There are all sorts of things that behaviorally you can't do, certainly not out in the open. And usually, it's a monetary price. In both Adventism and Judaism, the norm is to give about 10% of your income to charity. Orthodox Judaism, very difficult way of life. Seventh-day Adventism, difficult way of life. There's the Sabbath. And so you have to give up 1/7 of your time, 1/10 of your income. Then anyone can say they're spiritual. And I can imagine it feels terribly spiritual to have sex with someone else's wife if you're both attracted to each other. I think that could be the most spiritual thing in the world. So I've never been into spirituality, never been into 12-step programs. I remember I had one relationship in my life with an alcoholic. Once knew an alcoholic well. And it had its highs, the great sex. It had its lows where she would just disengage for days and wouldn't return my calls. And I remember when she went back to rehab for the second time, and she was a fairly well-known person, and I put it on my blog. And I said, all this addiction is a disease stuff. I don't buy it. I think addiction is a failure of moral will. It's just not strong enough. Like, there is no gene that anyone has discovered that forces anyone to take a drink or to snort some blow or to watch some porn. Don't buy it. During an off period in my relationship with this alcoholic, we're chatting online, and she says, my therapist says I'm a love addict. This is December 2005. I'd never heard of the term love addict before, so I immediately Googled it. So I was still obsessed with this girl. I'm obsessed with very capable women. because I get obsessive capable period. Obsessive capable people period. So I feel like they can rescue me. She was a very capable, high-functioning alcoholic. Immediately, like, Googled love addict, read it, and said, whoa, yeah, I kind of fit some of this. And I checked out some books from the library and read them. It's like, yeah, I can, I have a lot of the tendencies of the love addict. But I also have a lot of the tendencies of the bipolar. I'm not technically bipolar, but I have many of the characteristics of bipolar. Those manic highs where I feel like nothing I say or do will have consequences. And then I have the crashing lows where I feel like there's no hope. And that's kind of how I go through my life. In 2008, I interview an acquaintance who wrote a book called Love Junkie, Rachel Resnick, with a book on love addiction. It was interesting. January 2010, I interview a woman that a rabbi friend of mine used to go out with, and she's now a sex addiction therapist. I interviewed her, and after the interview, I talked to her, and it seemed like in many of the characteristics of the sex addict. Interesting. Then, March 2011, it's a writing exercise for Terry Silverman's writing class. I wrote out what I find erotic, like 3 main themes. And I read them to my therapist, and he said, that sounds like eroticized rage. So he said, that tends to come as a reaction to an over-controlling mother figure. Wow, that just smote me. As soon as I just heard those 2 words, eroticized rage, it just rang true. You know how you'll just hear something without understanding it, it just rings true? That's what it's like for me when I heard eroticized rage. So I went home, I Googled the term, and I learned that eroticized rage is kind of the anger underlying sexual activity. And most of the times when I have sex, it's not because I want to communicate how much I love the person, or that sometimes, but it's often out of an angry, vengeful place. Like it seems like it evens the score. Like all the things that have happened to me, where life has done me bad, if I look at porn, it seems to even the score. If I have some like grudge sex, it seems to just like even the score and make me feel whole. I've had a reasonable sense of moral boundaries, so most of my expressions in this eroticized rage, I believe, being socially acceptable, but you don't have a real handle on this. This is the type of person who becomes a rapist or a molester, or there are lots of antisocial expressions of eroticized rage. I can feel them under the surface, and I researched it. So it's the anger underneath sexual behavior. And it said that even if you only express this in socially acceptable ways, it's a poison, and it's going to pollute the way you interact with people in daily life. And I have a real cruel sense of humor. I mean, I basically hate people, generally speaking, except for those who enjoy reading books. You know how you'll sometimes turn a corner and run into someone unexpectedly? Usually if it's a woman, they'll smile, because women get their sense of safety from connection. But when I run into people unexpectedly, it's not, that's not me. I kind of have a chip on my shoulder. I'm a preacher's kid. And I don't know, when I start reading my stuff, people say, I get this image of, this angry child shaking his fists and saying, you can't tell me what to do. So that's basically my psychological impulse. My emotional maturity is about 4 years old. I was talking to the Rebbitzin the other day, and she was kind of concerned about my adolescent behavior on Facebook. And because she was trying to set me up. And women would look at my Facebook, and they were appalled. And she said, I have teenagers, and so I said, well, emotionally I'm not a teenager, I'm 4 years old. I've always been a sucker for self-help. It ain't worked. that I'm an enthusiast. I'll find something. Yes, this is the answer. Running marathons, that's the answer. Reading books, that's the answer. Fantasy, imagining I'm a great person. Politics, redemption, Marxism, communism, ethical monotheism, Dennis Prager, Orthodox Judaism. These are the answer. So probably shouldn't trust anything I say.
You have 9 minutes left.
I was in therapy 2009. Beautiful therapist. I loved her. Oh, I loved her. I loved going in every week. And I was talking about my enthusiasms at the time were Orthodox Judaism, which I still hold to, Alexander technique, now a teacher, still enthusiastic, and Kundalini yoga, which I'm no longer practicing. I practiced basically daily for 2 years. And she said to me, do you think these things, you're using them to ward off your underlying depression? Yeah. I thought Orthodox Judaism could fix me. Most of the people I know, my understanding of their journey anyway, is that they thought becoming Orthodox would fix them. It didn't fix me. Thought yoga would fix me. I thought Alexander technique would fix me. Thought God, living in God, would fix me. Thought leading a righteous life would fix me. So now I've got this great one-man show about working the 12 steps for relief from love and sex addiction. Then maybe I'm just using to ward off my underlying depression. Sex and love addiction, 12-step programs, that's the answer, I'm transformed. But I would have told you all these other times. I was transformed by jogging 5 miles every day. I was transformed by listening to Dennis Prager. How many times have I been transformed? And my essential basic moral character and the way I treated people wasn't affected. So, who am I to tell you that I've been transformed by working the 12 steps? I'm deluded so much of the time. I think I've been transformed by working the 12 steps, but it's really not for me to say. Went into my first meeting in April of 2011, walk in the door, and the woman sitting across from me pretty obviously looks like a sex worker, former sex worker. Like, you become a sex worker or you have a serious time with drugs or alcohol abuse, and it gets written on your face pretty quickly. I can pick it up. So I went into the room, and there were a lot of people who had been crushed by their addictions, kind of slumped down. At this point, I'd been porn-free for 6 months. So there'd been a lot of times in my life where I've gone years without looking at porn. So that's why I never thought I was a porn addict. And then there'd be times when I'd look at it 3 times a day. So I just love this product made by John Thompson. That's the name of the product. It's just a killer. There's YouPorn. You can get anything you want on YouPorn. And I just love the John Thompson product. I just get like these feverish phases where I just have to get that relief. Then I'd get months without it, years without it. So here I am in the meeting, and the lead speaker talks about how he had these certain cyclical patterns in his relationships. 5 minutes? And identify with that, because I've never had a relationship much longer than a year. I've had half a dozen relationships that lasted about a year. And my therapist recommended a 12-step program that kind of looked at these things mainly in the context of relationships. And after the main speaker, we all had 3 minutes to share. So I shared, I said, hey, I rode on the porn industry for 12 years and grew up a Seventh-day Adventist preacher's kid. And afterwards, this other guy came up. He was also a Seventh-day Adventist preacher's kid. And he was just like the coolest guy. He was just like a great guy. Just a great guy. He was like good looking and just dynamic and just really honest, no pretense. And this is a good guy. You know, I would go to meetings, meet people like this and hang out with people like this. And so after the meeting, we were hanging out in the parking lot. It's me and this great guy. The speaker is also a great guy. And they've read about me in the LA Weekly and other places. And so they were interested in my story. I was interested in theirs. I confess, yeah, I'm a junkie for self-help. And, you know, try this and this and this and this and this. You know, I'll try anything. And the speaker says, well, 12 Steps isn't self-help. It's about transcending the tyranny of the self through service. So I liked some of the people at the meeting. I liked the meeting. I started going back. By about the third meeting, I could feel a definite sobering effect having gone to a meeting. Because when I then stepped out into life, I wasn't quite as predatory. Like normally, my de facto is when I walk through life, you know, I'm just looking around at who I want to fuck, and imagining how I want to fuck her. That's kind of how I go through life. Like, there's the small percentage of women that I want to fuck, and there's everyone else. And everyone else is pretty much invisible to me unless they read books. And I noticed that as I came out of meetings, for hours, I wasn't having these predatory thoughts. I wasn't thinking about, oh, you know, I just want to relate to that woman in a sexual way. And I felt this sense of peace. It's really depressing to have this like overwhelming urge to like, you know, really fuck someone hard. And, you know, if I can just fuck this woman hard, you know, then I'll feel okay, knowing that that's only going to last for a few minutes or a few hours, maybe a day or two. And then that overwhelming need to fuck some attractive woman really hard comes back, and it's going to haunt you, you know, till you die. That's a depressing way to live life. So even if you're like righteous, okay, I've got these rules about how I'm going to behave, it's depressing knowing that like every time I see a woman, my first thought is, do I want to fuck her or not? If I want to fuck her, how do I want to fuck her? Do I want to lovingly fuck her? Do I want to brutally fuck her? Do I want to fuck her with her wearing this outfit? Do I want her to pretend to be my therapist? Do I want her to pretend to be my 7th grade teacher? Would it be really hard if she was married? Now, I know I can never do that, but I can fantasize about doing that. And it's kind of a depressing way to go through life. So I started showing up to meetings once, twice a week. I became the spiritual guy you see in front of you now. Thank you very much.